The movie begins in the year 2563, 300 years after Earth's colossal war with the United Republic of Mars known as the Fall. Amidst a sprawling scrapyard, Dr. Dyson Ito, a middle-aged man, is searching through debris when he stumbles upon the remnants of a cyborg girl. Remarkably, her head and core are still functional, and her human brain is alive.
You're alive?
Recognizing the rarity of this technology, Ito is intrigued. He transports her to his clinic, intent on restoring her to life. In his workshop, he and his assistant meticulously attach her head to a beautifully crafted body. The following day, the cyborg girl regains consciousness and is astonished by her new form. She marvels at her exquisitely designed, doll-like body and quickly masters control over it. Looking at herself in disbelief, she moves to explore her reflection in the mirror. She then sneaks up on Ito and his assistant while they are busy at work. Noticing her, Ito expresses his delight at seeing her fully operational. He introduces himself and his assistant Nurse Gerhard to the cyborg girl. He offers her an orange, but she doesn't even know how to eat it.
Taste receptors are working. You'll like this a whole lot better with the peel off.
She inquires if they have any information about her past, as she has no memories of her previous life. Ito explains that they are just as in the dark, hoping that she might have some answers since her brain was intact.
That's so good.
To lift her spirits, Ito then takes her to explore the city. As they walk through the streets, the girl is captivated by the sight of a magnificent city floating in the sky.
Yeah! What's that?
Ito explains that this city is called Zalem, the last of the great sky cities to survive the war.
What holds it up? Magic?
Something stronger. Engineering.
And the place they are in is known as Iron City. The cyborg girl asks Ito to give her a name. He names her Alita.
Alita.
I love it. Can we keep it? At least until I can remember my real name?
As they continue exploring the city, Alita notices the multitude of languages spoken around her. Dr. Ito explains that people from all over the world have converged here after the war, all serving Zalem, a city that no one is allowed to visit, a rule strictly enforced. Suddenly, Alita's attention is captured by a screen broadcasting a brutal cyborg sport. Ito identifies it as motorball.
That's so cool.
And advises her not to get distracted by it. As they wander appreciating the city's rich cultural tapestry, Ito buys her some shawarma before excusing himself to attend to other matters. While enjoying her meal, Alita befriends a small dog, sharing her food with it. Just then, a wanted poster flutters toward her, announcing a bounty for the perpetrator of 6 women's murders. Her examination is cut short by the lumbering presence of a large robot known as a Centurion. Instinctively, Alita adopts a defensive stance. However, she is quickly pulled aside by a passing young man. Despite this, she deftly maneuvers under the robot, rescuing the dog from harm. The young man, impressed by her agility, takes a moment to realize she is a cyborg.
It's really nice work. Did Doc Ito do it?
He built all of me, except my core.
As Dr. Ito returns, interrupting their interaction, the young man promises to meet Alita again and hastily departs. Curious, Alita asks about him, and Ito reveals his name is Hugo, cautioning her to be wary of trusting people too readily. Later that evening, somewhere in the city, a woman is about to enter her apartment when she is suddenly attacked by someone. At that exact moment, Alita wakes up to her scream. She pokes her head out of her bedroom and spots Ito sneaking back into the house, clutching a large suitcase with blood on his hand. The next day, Alita assists Dr. Ito and his assistant in repairing a man who complains that thugs ripped off his cyborg parts to sell on the black market for motorball players. Nurse Gerhard mentions that a woman was murdered last night near the same location.
For now, I don't want you out after dark. Is that understood?
Okay.
Alita notices a wound on Dr. Ito's arm and begins to suspect his involvement in the crime. As she walks out of Dr. Ito's house, Alita is stopped by a striking woman with a distinctive mark on her forehead.
Hey, kid!
The woman, named Chiren, boldly grabs Alita's arm, examining it closely.
Hey, what's your problem?
Chiren is revealed to be Ito's ex-wife. Later, Dr. Ito and Chiren take a stroll through the city. Chiren inquires about Alita's identity and why Ito chose to give her the body intended for their deceased daughter, which he was supposed to destroy. Ito explains that Alita is now his new assistant, and he couldn't bring himself to destroy the body after their daughter's death. Chiren then tries to persuade Ito to join her in working for Vector, the shadowy overlord of Iron City, in building cyborgs for Motorball, hoping it might allow them to return to Zalem.
I won't help you build monsters.
Ito refuses, insisting that there is no way back to Zalem, and that Chiren is being deceived by Vector. Undeterred, Chiren declares that she will do whatever it takes to return to Zalem and storms off to meet with Blade. Oh, I'm sorry, to meet with Vector. It's Vector. Alita links up with Hugo and his friends and decides to join their informal motorball game. On her first attempt, she crashes into a signpost.
You can let go of the remote now.
Undeterred, she tries again, but gets smacked by one of Hugo's friends, Tanji, who mocks her angrily.
Nice, Tanji, thanks. She's never played before.
Alita doesn't let this slide. She jumps back into the game, targeting Tanji. When he tries to elbow her out again, she uses her fighting skills to knock him down and scores her first goal. Hugo teases Tanji for getting beaten by a newcomer.
Your freak girlfriend's got some serious malfunction.
And then walks up to Alita, offering her a ride home. He admits she definitely has some talent for motorball. On their way, Hugo tries to learn more about Alita.
So you can't remember anything?
I'm trying to.
Family? Friends? Favorite food?
Nothing. Well, maybe oranges, but that's just since yesterday.
But I really don't understand why she would choose oranges when she has tried the best dish on earth, shawarma. They stop at a food shop where Hugo buys her some chocolate, and she instantly falls in love with the taste.
That's so great. I have a favorite food now.
Just then, a bounty hunter named Zapan walks by. Hugo reveals that Zapan is hunting his target, and Alita can't help but notice how cool Zapan's sword is.
All guns are outlawed in Iron City, punishable by death.
In the evening, Alita tries to sneak back home but isn't slick enough. Dr. Ito catches her and asks why she's coming back past her curfew. She explains she lost track of time. Dr. Ito warns her not to trust anyone too easily and offers her some food.
You have any chocolate?
The next day, Hugo takes Alita to his secret spot atop a high building, providing a clear view of Salem. He shares that it's his dream to go to Salem one day. He even claims that if he were as strong as Alita, he would climb the tube that transports cargo to Salem. Hugo informs Alita that she originates from Salem because everything in the scrapyard where Dr. Ito found her is dumped from there.
Starting to feel like I wasn't very important. Just an insignificant girl thrown out with the rest of the garbage.
Alita agrees but mentions she has no memories of Salem. Later that evening, Alita notices Dr. Ito sneaking out of the house. This time, she decides to follow him to discover what he is up to. From a distance, she watches as Dr. Ito tracks a girl. He opens his suitcase and begins to assemble a big-ass rocket hammer. Just as he is about to strike, Alita intervenes, mistakenly thinking he's the murderer the wanted poster mentioned. But it turns out to be an ambush by the cyborg criminals responsible for the recent murders.
Looking for me?
At this moment, Alita learns that Dr. Ito is a hunter-warrior, and he was trying to protect the girl. Dr. Ito urges Alita to hide while he confronts the cyborgs alone. He engages one of them, but is quickly overpowered. Surprisingly, the girl he tried to rescue is also a cyborg involved in criminal activities. Alita then jumps into the fray, displaying extraordinary martial skills and immediately eliminates one attacker.
My God.
She faces off against the cyborg woman. Despite being unarmed, Alita proves nearly invincible to her opponent due to her superior fighting skills and reflexes. However, a huge cyborg with a weird name, Grewishka, immobilizes Ito, forcing him to watch as his accomplice attempts to kill Alita. With precision and power that hint at a warrior past she cannot recall, Alita skillfully dominates the fight, eventually killing her opponent. Grewishka then joins the fight. Alita performs a somersault kick, during which she sees a flashback of herself fighting on the moon alongside warriors like her. Her teammate calls her 99.
99! On your left!
She finishes the kick, chopping off his arm. Alita grabs Ito's rocket hammer and attacks the villain. Realizing he has no chance against this little girl, Grewishka vows to return for them both and escapes into the underground part of the city. Dr. Ito praises Alita's martial arts skills, and together they head to the Hunter Warriors headquarters to collect the bounty for the eliminated cyborg criminals. Afterward, Alita shares with Ito the brief flashback she experienced during the fight.
Before the fall, there were police to stop criminals. Now the factory pays us to do the dirty work.
Ito enters the headquarters, leaving Alita outside and hands over the heads of the dead cyborgs.
Bounty for the cyborg Nisyana was 20,000 credits.
Alita accuses Dr. Ito of withholding information about her past. In response, Ito takes her back to the lab and reveals that the body he gave her was originally intended for his deceased daughter, after whom he named her.
Her name was Alita.
Alita asks what happened to her. Dr. Ito recounts that a cyborg he had built for motorball came to his clinic one night, seeking drugs. And now we know what happened to Rico after Starship Troopers. During the encounter, the cyborg knocked Ito down, but his daughter couldn't get out of his way fast enough and was killed. Her mother, Chiren, couldn't cope with the loss and left Ito. This tragedy spurred Ito to become a hunter warrior. Although he hunted down and killed the murderer, it brought him no peace, so he continued his hunting career.
Did you ever find peace?
I found you.
I'm not your daughter. I don't know what I am.
I do.
Dr. Ito then scans Alita and reveals that her heart is made from a technology lost over 300 years ago. Her heart, powered by an antimatter microreactor, is strong enough to power the entire Iron City for years.
This is lost technology. Nobody's made this stuff since before the fall.
Yeah, right. So I'm 300 years old.
Sweetheart, you are.
At Vector's place, he urges Chiren to create a cyborg that will become the motorball champion. Chiren promises to deliver the best, provided she gets the necessary equipment. After Vector leaves, Grewishka crashes through the window of Chiren's bedroom. He begs for help. Initially, Chiren is reluctant to help him, but upon learning that Alita is responsible for his condition, she changes her mind. Later that night, Alita reflects on her flashback. Pondering her past and guessing who she might have been, she begins training, inspired by Ito's words that she will remember everything one day. In Vector's lab, Chiren is working with Grewishka. Vector enters and suggests stripping him for parts. Chiren informs him that she found a wired chip in Grewishka's head and suspects someone in Zalem is controlling him. Vector is not surprised by this revelation. Chiren wants to remove the chip, but their conversation is interrupted by Nova, who connects to Grewishka.
Nova? Who did this to Grewishka?
Upon learning that Alita caused Grewishka's damage, Nova demands they upgrade Grewishka so he can kill Alita and retrieve her core.
I don't understand how she could create such force with such a small body.
It was not the power of the body that did this. It was the mind. She knows the fighting techniques of Panzerkunst.
Nova possesses Vector's body and promises Chiren a place in Zalem if she can meet his demand. She vows to bring him Alita. Dr. Ito and Alita search the Hunter Warriors' wanted database for Grewishka, but can't find him. Alita is perplexed because Grewishka is responsible for all the recent killings of women. Dr. Ito concludes that someone powerful from Zalem is protecting Grewishka. Upon hearing this, Alita expresses her desire to become a Hunter Warrior. Dr. Ito opposes the idea, as he doesn't want her to become involved in violence or get blood on her hands. Frustrated by his response, Alita runs off. She meets up with Hugo to watch the motorball. As they head to the arena, Alita vents her frustrations about Ito. The match starts, and Alita watches excitedly as the cyborgs fiercely compete for the ball. Meanwhile, Hugo takes the opportunity to show her around. He points out one of the top cyborgs, Jashugan, and suggests that he might be the final champion, potentially earning a passage to Zalem as his prize. From a distance, they spot Vector and Chiren. Hugo explains that Vector essentially controls the motorball. Back in the match, one of the cyborgs, Kanuba, uses his grind cutters to devastate his opponents and wins the match. Vector, however, is not pleased with the outcome. Chiren approaches him and insists that he find a way to acquire Kanuba's grind cutters, which she plans to use to upgrade Grewishka. Moments later, Hugo's friends rush over and inform him they need to leave. Before they depart, Hugo invites Alita to join him the next day on a trip outside the city, suggesting it might help her recover her memories. This evening, Kanuba is celebrating his victory with 3 girls when he is suddenly attacked by a group of masked assailants. They overpower him, load him into a truck, and sever his grind cutters. Vector arrives at the scene just as one of the masked men reveals himself to be Hugo. Vector commends him for his successful heist and pays him. He then orders the grind cutters be delivered to Chiren. Hugo hands his share of the payment to his friend Tanji, who questions when Hugo plans to tell Alita about his real job. Hugo dismissively shrugs off the question. After the group departs, Vector eliminates Kanuba. The next day, Alita follows Hugo and his friends to a location outside the city. They share a brief history of the war, explaining that Zalem is the only city that remains standing.
Who was the enemy?
The Urn.
United Republics of Mars. URM.
They take her to a lake where an spaceship has crashed.
Salvagers have jacked some stuff over the years for metal, but it's all technology, so it's mostly been left alone.
This is an ship?
Uh-huh.
You know, it's pretty hard to sell this stuff since no one knows what it is or...
Alita points out the command deck of the ship, then dives into the lake and makes her way to the ship. The ship activates in response to Alita's presence. She navigates its corridors with ease, instinctively knowing where to go. Inside, Alita enters a command that deactivates the power shield, revealing a cyborg body. She retrieves the body and returns to her friends.
Oh, this can't be good.
Back in the city, Alita takes the body to Dr. Ito's lab and insists that he attach her to it. Dr. Ito refuses, explaining that the body is known as a berserker, highly advanced technology that is extremely powerful and potentially dangerous if not properly controlled.
The instinctive fighting technique you use is Panzerkunst, a lost combat art for machine bodies. It was used by the berserkers. You are not just a warrior, Alita. You're an berserker.
Frustrated by his refusal, Alita storms out. Determined, Alita heads to the Hunter Warriors headquarters and registers as a Hunter Warrior. After completing her registration, she visits the Hunter Warriors hangout spot with Hugo. Hugo seems reluctant to enter at first, but Alita reassures him that everything is fine. Before going in, Alita spots a little dog from the street and takes a moment to play with it. Once inside, she observes Zapan beating up some guys. He notices them and decides to flirt with Alita. Showing her ID, Alita reveals that she is also a Hunter Warrior. Zapan introduces her to some of the most lethal hunter warriors, skeptically remarking that such a cute girl isn't tough enough to call herself a bounty hunter.
And then there's McTeague, the dog master. With his hellhounds, his biggest problem is having enough left to identify after so he can collect the bounty. This is Master Clive Lee of the White Hot Palm. He has over 200 confirmed kills.
He proudly displays his Damascus blade, honed to a monomolecular edge and forged before the war using the lost arts of the metallurgy.
And who did you kill to acquire it?
Unintimidated by his attempts to instill fear, Alita addresses the hunters, asking for their help in defeating Grewishka with a motivational speech. However, she receives no support, and Zapan laughs at her efforts. Zapan then suggests that Alita should cut Hugo loose so he can be with her. In response, Alita roasts Zapan, prompting laughter from the other hunter warriors.
What could I learn from a loudmouth pretty boy who spends all of his money on his face?
Maybe I'll pull your arms and legs off. Roll your head around in the street. Maybe that'll teach you some manners.
You might mess up your hair.
Unable to tolerate the humiliation, Zapan attacks Alita, who easily overpowers him without breaking a sweat. Despite wielding his formidable sword, he finds himself helpless against her skills.
You do not deserve such a weapon.
Emboldened, Alita challenges the warriors to a fight, declaring that if she wins, they must help her. None are willing to face the girl who easily defeated Zapan.
This bitch broke my nose.
Yes, I did.
So she begins taunting their cowardice. Seconds later, a fight breaks out. Alita dominates the battle against all the patrons of the bar. As she gains the upper hand over the warriors, Dr. Ito arrives and intervenes.
Knock it off! Or no more free repairs!
His threat is effective, and the fight stops. At this moment, the monstrous cyborg Grewishka arrives, looking noticeably upgraded. He declares his intent to capture Alita and demonstrates the power of his new grind cutters by attacking one of the warriors. Grewishka announces he's only there for Alita, and the crowd hesitates to intervene.
She's all yours.
What about the rest of you?
There ain't no bounty on this guy, Doc. Not our problem.
The little dog that had befriended Alita stands up to Grewishka, barking defiantly at him, but Grewishka mercilessly kills the dog. Alita, fueled by rage, uses the dog's blood as war paint on her face. When Grewishka tries to strike her, she skillfully dodges. He then uses his grind cutters to break the floor, creating an opening to his domain beneath the city. Without hesitation, Alita leaps down after him, and a fierce battle unfolds underground. Alita fights with precision and finesse, showcasing her extraordinary skills. However, Grewishka's relentless assault eventually finds its mark, and his grind cutters slice through her body. In this critical moment, Alita experiences a flashback of her training, where her coach reveals that Nova is the real enemy. Refusing to surrender, Alita musters her remaining strength. With her only functioning hand, she leaps at Grewishka and manages to gouge out his eye, leaving her arm stuck in his eye socket. Just then, Dr. Ito, Hugo, and the Dogmaster arrive and help fend off Grewishka.
He wasn't a dog lover.
Dr. Ito quickly carries the injured Alita back to the lab. On their way, they encounter Chiren, who tells Ito the mean stuff driven by her envy.
You think you can replace us that easily? Bring her back as many times as you like.
Left with no other options, Dr. Ito and his assistant attach Alita to the berserker body. The body begins making micro-adjustments autonomously.
The shell is reconfiguring to her subconscious image of herself.
Looks like she's a little older than you thought.
I've never seen anything like it.
Later on, Alita wakes Ito with a kiss and demonstrates the capabilities of her new body. Her new form is significantly faster and stronger, and she can now generate arc plasma to use as a weapon. She thanks Dr. Ito for his help with a warm hug. Alita then meets up with Hugo to show off her new body. Hugo is thrilled to see her up and active again, and he remarks that she now appears more mature with her new physique.
Why don't you like her?
I just never got the whole hard body thing. And besides, she's Erm. I mean, she was probably the enemy at one point.
300 years ago. Get over it.
As they leave, Alita mentions that her new body is more powerful and has enhanced touch sensitivity. Hugo gently touches her, and then they share a kiss.
Does it bother you that I'm not completely human?
You are the most human person I have ever met.
Back in Vector's lab, Grewishka is furious over the loss of his eye and his failure to eliminate Alita. Nova, possessing Vector's body, scolds Grewishka for his failure, telling him that his only chance for redemption is to bring him Alita's heart. Grewishka vows not to disappoint him this time. After regaining consciousness, Vector tells Chiren that he can't rely solely on Grewishka's success and that he needs to develop his own plan in case Grewishka fails again. After this, Vector invites Hugo for a drink to set up Alita. It turns out that Vector had once promised Hugo a passage to Salem in exchange for doing his dirty work and paying him a fixed sum of money. He manipulates Hugo into persuading Alita to try motorball. The next day, Alita visits Hugo and finds him asleep and hungover. Hugo wakes up and explains that he was out drinking with Vector, who reiterated the promise to take him to Zalem if he could gather the rest of the money needed. Alita had hoped maybe he'd want to stay. Upon realizing how important this is to him, Alita offers to help him by taking on more bounty jobs, but Hugo declines, not wanting to burden her. He admits he's unsure about his plans after meeting her. Moved by his concern, Alita dramatically offers her heart, urging Hugo to sell it so he can gather enough money for both of them to go to Zalem, while they find a cheap replacement.
He's got an microreactor for a power supply, probably worth millions.
Hugo refuses and advises her never to give up things so precious, no matter the reason.
That was pretty intense, huh?
Yeah, it was very intense.
Sorry.
Afterwards, they head out together. Hugo reveals another potential way to make money. Vector wants Alita to compete in motorball, and if she wins, they could advance to the senior league and make a substantial amount. Alita agrees, but only if Hugo will coach her. From a distance, Zapan observes the couple. He mutters to his friend, revealing that his plans for Alita will be worse than death. Determined to help Hugo, Alita enters the motorball tournament. Dr. Ito equips her with all the necessary gear. As he helps her suit up, Alita asks him if a human can love a cyborg.
Why does this cyborg love a human?
Dr. Ito assures her that it is indeed possible, but he also urges her to focus on the game and take care not to destroy her body, as he might not be able to repair this technology. After they part ways, she writes 99 on her suit, recalling the number from her memory. In another locker room, Vector gathers the cyborgs he has hired to compete against Alita. He promises a substantial sum of money to anyone who can eliminate her. Before the tournament begins, Alita calls Hugo to ask why he hasn't shown up yet.
I'm doing this for us, remember? You can't miss it.
He tells her he needs to handle something, but will be there soon. Meanwhile, Hugo meets Tanji, who is in the middle of stripping a cyborg for parts. Hugo calls him by his real name, which angers Tanji. Hugo declares his intention to quit their illicit activities, but Tanji reacts poorly, insulting Alita.
Should've jacked that bitch when you had the chance.
Their argument quickly escalates into a fight. During the scuffle, Zapan arrives and confronts Hugo, taunting him about Alita's reaction should she learn of his activities. He vows revenge on Hugo for Alita's earlier interference and decides to frame him for murder.
I never killed anyone.
Zapan kills the cyborg Tanji was stripping and blames Hugo. As he prepares to execute Hugo, Tanji intervenes and Zapan cuts him in half. In desperation, Hugo throws a firebomb at Zapan and flees. Zapan, undeterred, begins to track him relentlessly. Back in the arena, Alita positions herself at the starting line. Just seconds before the match begins, Dr. Ito spots several bounty hunters among the competitors and realizes the match is a setup. He warns Alita just in time.
It's a setup, you gotta get out of there.
They're gonna kill you.
Which ones?
All of them!
But she decides to compete anyway. As the match kicks off, the cyborgs immediately target Alita. She skillfully takes them out one by one, displaying remarkable fighting skills. Amidst the chaos, the cyborgs also turn on each other, each vying to capture their prey. The commentator praises her, calling her an angel with a body built for battle.
Number 99, Alita!
Despite sustaining some damage, Alita remains undeterred. During the match, Hugo calls her in a panic.
I've got a big problem.
Hugo, this is not a good time.
He reveals that Zapan is hunting him, intent on executing him, and pleads for her help. Alita instructs him to make his way to a specific location where she will meet him. After the call, Alita breaks out of the arena by crashing through a billboard. The pursuing cyborgs catch up and momentarily restrain her, but she fights back fiercely, managing to free herself and methodically take out her attackers. Meanwhile, Zapan finally catches up with Hugo. Just as he is about to execute him, Alita arrives in the nick of time. She disarms Zapan and saves Hugo. At that moment, Alita sees Hugo's wanted mugshot displayed on a nearby billboard. Zapan reveals Hugo's misdeeds.
Is it true?
Allie, you don't understand.
And Hugo admits that while he has not been completely honest with Alita, he has never committed murder. Alita is left deeply shocked. Zapan picks up his sword and orders Alita to step aside so he can complete his task. Alita threatens to kill him if he touches Hugo. Zapan reminds her that interfering with a hunter-warrior and his target is a crime. So Alita declares,
"He's mine!"
Then make the kill.
Before she can act, Zapan stabs Hugo with his sword.
Let me make it easier for you.
Leaving Alita horrified. A centurion arrives, demanding they hand over the criminal Hugo. Alita carries him into a nearby building, pleading with him not to die. Hugo tells that if she gets out with him alive, they will kill them both. With his dying breath, he confesses that he stopped stripping cyborgs because he loves her. They share a final kiss, observed from a distance by Chiren.
Did you find them?
No, they're gone.
Moved by their love, Chiren deceives Vector. Approaching Alita and Hugo, Chiren reveals there's a way to save Hugo. Moments later, Alita emerges with Hugo's head in her hand. The Centurions at the scene confirm the kill. Zapan, suspicious, checks if Hugo is truly dead and discovers that Alita is keeping his brain alive with her own heart's power. Zapan attempts to seize the head, but the Centurions accuse him of trying to steal another hunter's kill.
Violation. Hunter Warrior Zapan. Stealing another's bounty is against factory law and the hunter's code.
Hearing this, Alita takes Zapan's sword, slashes half of his face with it,
My face! My face!
and leaves the scene. Back in Dr. Ito's lab, he manages to save Hugo, attaching him to a new cyborg body. He credits Chiren's perfect surgical technique for saving Hugo's life without causing brain damage. Dr. Ito tells Alita that no one can buy their way to Salem. It's just a ploy by Vector to deceive gullible youths.
But how do you know that for sure?
He reveals that the only way to reach Salem is to become the motorball champion, sharing that he was born there himself. He recounts that when their daughter was found to have genetic flaws, Nova presented them with a harsh choice: stay in Salem and have their daughter terminated or be exiled from Salem. Choosing exile, they moved to Iron City, where Ito decided to remove his forehead mark to forget Salem. He adds that Iron City is monitored and controlled by Nova. Meanwhile, Vector confronts Chiren after learning that she helped Hugo and Alita. Chiren confesses that she couldn't proceed with their plan because she too is a mother. She informs Vector of her desire to quit. Vector asks if she still wants to go to Salem, but she asserts her disinterest. As Chiren walks away, she is confronted by Grewishka. Alita, overwhelmed by guilt for everything that has happened, is reassured by Dr. Ito, who insists it's not her fault and urges her not to blame herself for who she is. He emphasizes that only she can stop Vector. In a moment of acceptance, she calls him father for the first time.
Thank you, Father.
And leaves. Alita heads to Vector's factory. As she enters the building, several Centurions block her path. Generating arc plasma, she powers her sword and swiftly destroys all the Centurions.
Violation. Violation. Violate.
She breaks into Vector's office through the ceiling and confronts him for lying to Hugo about sending him to Salem. Vector opens a case revealing various body parts of Chiren.
Nova demands body parts for his experiments, especially the brains of people he admires.
And that is the only way anyone ever gets to Zang.
At that moment, Grewishka appears and strikes Alita with his grind cutter. This attack triggers a flashback for Alita, taking her back to the war with Salem. She sees her colleagues annihilated by a defense ring on the transport tube. Her commander urges her to complete the mission and destroy Salem. Snapping back to reality, Alita rises to her feet as her body repairs itself. She declares that she knows her real enemy and that Grewishka is merely a puppet.
And I'm just an insignificant girl.
When Grewishka launches his grind cutters at her again, she effortlessly slices them in half with her blade. In a split second, she bisects Grewishka, ending the threat without any apparent effort. After defeating Grewishka, Alita demands that Nova speak to her through Vector's body.
Speak!
What do you want me to say? I'll say anything.
Not you. Him!
Nova complies, possessing Vector. He commends her for exceeding his expectations by defeating Grewishka and turning Chiren against him. However, Nova then threatens to eliminate Dr. Ito and Hugo if he can't get to her.
I found the only way to enjoy immortality is to watch others die.
Unable to tolerate his threats any longer, Alita drives her sword into Vector's body, eliminating him.
You just lost a puppet.
That looks fatal. No matter. Vector was getting tiresome.
As he falls, she warns Nova that he has made a grave mistake by underestimating her. Just then, Dr. Ito calls. He informs Alita that factory enforcers were searching for Hugo, but he helped him escape, and now Hugo is attempting to climb the tube to Salem. Alita rushes after him. She catches up with Hugo on the tube and pleads with him not to continue, warning him of the dangers, but Hugo insists that his place is in Salem. She begs him to come back with her.
We don't belong anywhere except together.
You'll always be running.
Together. Come with me.
And he agrees. However, Nova, observing from afar, activates the tube's defense system, which sends blades down the tube. Hugo's attempt to jump clear fails, and the blades destroy his cyborg body. Alita grabs him to prevent his fall, but his cyborg hand slowly detaches. With his last words, Hugo thanks Alita for everything, then he falls to his death. Several months later, Alita is preparing for a motorball race in a locker room. The commentator introduces her as the new motorball star who has ascended to the Champion League in just a few months. She enters the arena to chants of her name from the crowd. In a defiant gesture, Alita raises her sword towards Salem, while Nova watches her from his city.